Welcome to the Who's Left podcast, a show about Indiana politics, history, and culture from the unapologetic perspective of the Hoosier Left. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers, and I'm recording from Bloomington. Friends, welcome back, and thank you for your patience. I've been away from the show, focusing on my family after the tragic loss of my son Lane last month. I won't retell his story here because I will become a sobbing mess and never get through the introduction, but I did post several written pieces, including the eulogy I wrote for him over at scottaaronrogers.substack.com, which express my emotions far better than I can in this space. But I will summarize the most recent of those pieces thusly. Having experienced the worst imaginable loss, having known true grief, really, for the first time, I think, some things just don't seem as important anymore. And for me, that's been my day job. Now, I understand that is a privilege most don't enjoy, and I have been extremely fortunate to have the time and space I've needed to grieve, and that we barely have the means to keep us afloat for a bit. But this devastating loss has changed me deeply, and I feel called to do something different. This is not to say repairing, remodeling, and renovating aren't important. They are. I mean, we're talking about people's homes, but I think I have some ability, some talent, not a ton, but enough, and a platform here that, used correctly, can help lessen the amount of grief and suffering here in Indiana. How? Well, by working full-time to call out Hoosier lawmakers, their financial backers, and the networks of people actively working to make our lives worse by cutting education, cutting healthcare, cutting gaping holes in the social safety net. Those whose policies kill children via environmental degradation, lack of access to necessary health care, and lax gun control laws. Those that ensure more parents will experience that same grief I feel. And I can't abide it. I will work to highlight these bad actors so we can replace them with more empathetic leadership. I will also shine the spotlight on Hoosier activists, organizations, and elected officials who are working to build a more just, equitable, and compassionate Indiana. But I can't do this without you. Right now, the only income I bring to my household is from this project. I rely on your financial support from paid subscriptions over at scottaaronrogers.substack.com. For $5 a month or only $50 a year, you can help me to push our state in a better direction and help my family in the process. And I get it. Not everybody can afford a paid subscription at this time. You can still help. Subscribe at the free level on Substack. Set your favorite podcast player to auto-download new episodes of the show. Please rate and review the podcast on Apple or whatever platform you use. Follow me on social media at ScottRog78, that's SCOTTROG78, on Instagram, Threads, and the platform everyone still calls Twitter. Facebook.com/Who's Left, that's HOOS Left. And on Mastodon at ScottRog78 at Hoosier.social. most importantly, please pass on the word. Forward the newsletter to a friend or a colleague. Don't just like, but share on social media. Record the show on a mixtape for your crush. Consider it a small investment in Indiana's future. What will you get for your investment? A full-time Who's Left looks like new content every day, either written or audio, and hey, maybe video at some point. It looks like full coverage of the 2024 election cycle in Indiana and beyond. And it looks like zooming out to see how the forces at work in our state function nationally and even globally. And though I'm looking at special features for paid subscribers, would anybody be interested in a private chat group or a Discord maybe? I do not plan on paywalling any content because I believe in open access to information. So your support helps make that content freely available to all Hoosiers. This begins today with our first anniversary special and a whole week of new content. Episode number 1 of the podcast dropped last year on February 14th with my friend Tom Levon as the special guest. Tom is back, and we reset the table, putting the current crisis of social breakdown in historical perspective. Tomorrow, Chelsea McDonnell, Director of Outreach for Mad Voters Indiana, returns to discuss what the crisis looks like in practice as Republicans sow grief for their citizenry at the Indiana State House with terrible legislation. Wednesday, Chairman of the Monroe County Democratic Party, David Henry, joins the show for a talk about fighting those efforts via the two-party system, why it works the way it does, and the benefits and drawbacks of working within that system. Thursday, Indianapolis City Councilman Jesse Brown returns to the pod to discuss his first month plus on the council, coming into the party and then government as an outsider, and some of the resistance he's faced from fellow Democrats along the way. Friday, I'll have a new written piece on Substack, and I hope to have you aboard for the full ride. Today, Tom and I return to the topic we discussed in Episode 1, our current time of historical crisis, through the lens of William Strauss and Neil Howe's cyclical generational theory of history. We discuss our current period of polarization, how it mirrors other tumultuous periods in history, how we collectively forget the lessons learned during those difficult times as those who remember them pass on, how certain bad actors recognize this and push on society's fault lines to destroy the social order, and how we must understand this if we are to create a new social order based on fairness and empathy. Here's my interview with Tom Levon. Welcome back to the Who's Left podcast for the third time now, I believe.
Third time, yes.
Tom Levon, there we are. How you doing, bud?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good.
So, let us rewind the tape to about a year ago. Episode number 1 of the Who's Left podcast. Tom here was my guest. And we began this show by sort of talking about the era of crisis that we're in, right? The crucible. We are in the ship, right? 2024 is a difficult year. And we put this in the context of sort of the generational theory first proposed in a book by, Strauss and Howe. Was it Neil Strauss and William Howe, or William Strauss and Neil Howe? I don't remember. But
there were names and there were places. I'll tell you that.
Yes. So anyway, they developed this kind of generational theory of society, and if you recall, the basic premise is that society's social time moves kind of in a cyclical cycle, like the seasons, whereas like Western historians and liberals often kind of view the progress of social time as linear, right? The arc of the moral universe bends towards justice, right? Um, a lot of traditional societies have viewed time as cyclical, like this, okay? And so they introduce the concept of a saeculum.
Oh, that's a fun word. I haven't heard.
It is a fun word. That is some quality Latin right there. And it basically means a period of time equivalent to the length of a long human life. So 80, 85 years, somewhere in there. It always doesn't line up perfectly. But, for example, okay, these 80-year cycles, if you look at the troubled crisis time we're in now, 80 years ago was World War II, right? A time of crisis for the Republic. 80 years before that was the Civil War, right? About 80 years before that, a little more, was, right in the American Revolution, the constitutional era. So you can see how there's sort of these cycles in American history where there's an era of crisis and a struggle, and then like a new consensus is built, right? And they liken this to the seasons, as we were talking about. So after you have your crisis event, your war, whatever it is, your your winter of discontent, right?
Yeah.
You emerge into a new spring, a new kind of social order, right? Think, if you will, of like post-war America, the 50s, the time everybody points to is like, the height of American power and
the height of American exceptionalism.
Yeah.
I feel like that's where that myth originated from. I say this. I see the look on your face. This
well, no, I mean, no, it's true. So yeah, you've got that's your high, and that's going to last about a generation.
Yeah.
Right. So you get to the late 60s, the early 70s, you start to see rifts in the social order, right? You got your student protests, your race protests. You got Dr. King and RFK and Malcolm X and, the assassinations. You got all of that cultural turmoil, around the Vietnam War era there. As the social order kind of begins to fray, like people have an awakening, right? Like as the social order is settled after the crisis event, right? There's sort of like more, like institutions are strong, like social conformity is greater, society is more cohesive, right? You think of the 50s and every black and white and everybody, picket fences and suburbia, all that. Ignore all the horror in the background, right? But if the whitewashed America of the 1950s. As you get to the 60s and the 70s, people are like, hey, maybe the social order isn't all that it's cracked up to be. And
there are people on the outside. There are outsiders that are saying, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah, maybe we didn't get any of the social high, but we're left out of it. Or hey, maybe there's other ways to do things. Things are very conformist. Maybe we should leave room for more like individual solutions, right? And as you get in So that's your summer of the period, right? So you've got the high, the spring, everybody's, happy and united, right? To be through the crisis times. And then that sort of slowly falls apart, and people are, introduce their own unique twists on things and have this awakening to all the, the way things could be, right? And as new ideas are introduced into the system, it sort of unravels. So if you look at, in our country, from the 80s through the 90s, Reaganism, into the Bushes and even Clinton, the neoliberal order takes hold. We sort of systematically dismantle the institutions of like the New Deal, right? The FDR era, dismantled, hollowed out, privatized, and the old order begins
the ultra capitalism drive sort of starts kicking.
Yes, the ultra capitalism, exactly. Unconstrained, unregulated, free market. No room for the commons. Everything, privately held. That brings us to a crisis period, and I think we've essentially been in one since like 2008, right? The market crash.
Yeah.
It's a crisis of capitalism, right? Like all of the benefit of the old system, all the structure, all the high taxes, the social cooperation that went into, to borrow a term, making America great, right? All that stuff got hollowed out to where basically just, the top 1% owns everything now.
Yeah.
And we're kind of living in the consequences until we can build a new social order. And that's the crisis era that we're in, right? The Tea Party, right? The response to the Obama presidency by the white supremacists, then the Trump era and the chaos that has ensued since, right? This is all a crisis of neoliberal hypercapitalism. The system has failed. We're living with the repercussions of that. Tom, you know who Antonio Gramsci is?
Oh boy, I sure don't actually know who that is. I don't even think I've heard that name.
Antonio Gramsci was a Italian communist who was imprisoned during most of the Mussolini era. Okay. Best quote ever to describe this time. He says, "The old world is dying. The new world struggles to be born. This is the time of monsters." And I think that perfectly encapsulates what we mean by this crisis era. Okay? So we're in the shit, right? We're in the shit. We've been in the shit for several years. And both the far left and the far right are kind of taken, enthralled by this, the four turnings here. Steve Bannon, you know who Steve Bannon is, right?
I believe I have a vague understanding of Steve Bannon. I could see
that strategist.
Yeah.
Worked in the Trump White House for a while, former Breitbart editor.
Yeah.
The War Room podcast
narration, but it's probably just alcoholism.
Dude, yeah, man. For this is a powerful, influential figure on the far right, way more than anybody knows.
Yeah.
And he is a sloppy looking motherfucker, isn't he?
Yeah.
It looks like he rolls out of bed after a bender and threw on 3 unbuttoned shirts, and that was his outfit.
I hate to sort of go off on a ad hominem attack branch, but he looks like he stood outside in direct straight line, 40-mile-an-hour wind that is under, it's negative 15 degrees. His face looks not super great.
Yeah, yes.
Like, hey, you okay?
To death if it wasn't for the brandy, right?
Yeah, it's like when you show up at work and there's a new guy, is he like, hey, are you okay? Like, it's like, oh no, he always. Anyway,
No. Look. I will always hold space to rip Steve Bannon. The man.
listen, this is a safe place to talk shit about Steve Bannon.
One of the most dangerous people. Yeah, most people. But anyway, one of
He-
he's go ahead.
Going back to what you said his accolades are, he basically controls like a media outlet. I feel like that's the thing that people, it seems like, people will forget about this, and it's like, oh yeah, Trump's so dangerous. It's like, hey, it's the people who like control your media that allowed him to like kind of have that place to do that. Yeah, he's dangerous, but it's like you're kind of missing. We talked about this a lot in the pre-show, missing the forest for the trees. It's like, you're kind of missing X, Y, and Z here of how this happened. You're forgetting things like this guy who you don't want to look at again, who we've just talked a bunch of shit about, is actually really dangerous and has some contribution into it, and people like him. Not just him. Well, let's not give him too much credit. It was a lot of places, a lot of neutral ground. Your Facebook, your Twitter, your throwing.
Oh yeah,
a lot of these.
Well, he's behind the whole Cambridge Analytica thing, and if people don't know about that, look it up. The whole Cambridge Analytica scandal is basically Bannon and other far right allies worldwide had access to people's Facebook data to figure out basically how to control their mind. And I'm not talking brainwashing. I'm talking about like algorithmically putting content in front of them that's going to get them riled up, and
or rock your brain.
And either one works, really.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely it's demographical. It's like, oh well, you show this to enough late Gen Xers, baby boomers, they're going to lose their mind and they're going to dig deeper and think that all this bullshit that's wrong is true. There's like a child sex ring under a pizza place, shit like that, and they'll believe it. You find the little things, and then the algorithm suggests more things. And if you presented some of this stuff to them outside of this algorithm, they'd be like, that sounds stupid and ridiculous. But like, you get them to believe it, you get them to think it's the truth that they believe, they'll believe it all day. Get somebody to think your idea is their idea and you won. You know what I mean? That's what, there are people in this like Steve Bannon who probably understand this, people who don't. Like, I don't feel like Mark Zuckerberg really, I don't really think I think he's kind of apolitical. He's like, whatever I need to do to get this platform to further my goals. It's sort of, that's the neutral battleground of the negative neutral side of things, is in a kind of way.
Yeah, capital is apolitical in that it doesn't care how it makes money. It just needs to keep growing and making more money.
Yeah.
But you hit on something. We were talking about riling people up, and the Bannons of the world who's aligned with like Russian fascists like Alexander Dugin and Giorgia Meloni in Italy and Marine Le Pen in France and Viktor Orban in Hungary and Geert Wilders in the Netherlands. Like all these far right ethno-nationalist figures. Okay. But they use targeted attacks on the internet, directed at people, in America and all throughout the West. It's not just us. They did the England, the Brexit thing. That's same people. Putting polarizing, divisive information in front of everybody. Just bombarding us with it to get Western countries to tear themselves apart from the inside, right? You find the cultural push points, and you push those buttons and rile people up. And they did back in 2016. It was a lot of like impersonating Americans or American organizations are creating like fake organizations or whatever from, like Russian bot farms or whatever. But now it's just like amplifying people who are already divisive.
Yeah. Or
Elon Musk, your Tucker Carlsons, your, Glenn Greenwald, Ian Miles Chong, Andrew Tate, all these assholes.
Miles Chong recently almost getting killed in whatever country he lives in.
They missed.
Well, I mean, he had to basically lie through. I say lie through his teeth. I think tell the truth through his teeth to his own government. Was he? He's in Malaysia, right?
I believe so.
Which is prominently Muslim, which I didn't know.
Yes.
So yeah, he was big time supporting Palestine not Palestine. That'd be hilarious. He was supporting Israel on Twitter. And boy, that sure is illegal there in Malaysia to do that on social media. So somebody found out, and he had some splaining to do. This triggered a avalanche of people on Twitter being like, "Oh, Ian Miles Chong? Oh yeah, he was that guy that," because it's also very legal to sell drugs in Malaysia. And people were like, "Oh yeah, that's that guy that hooked me up with Molly in a clinch when I visited my family in Malaysia." Just like, putting a lot of heat on him, which I'm sure that's less so because he's not posting it, but like people are like, fuck you. Because he's a mouthpiece, right? Like he doesn't, he's a bad person, bad guy. So he left himself vulnerable. Also isn't American, has never lived in America, seems to be a self-proclaimed expert on American culture and politics and cultural war stuff. Weird. Only thing I can say about that, bizarre hobby. Bizarre, like, thing to make your personality around.
These people are all complete fucking weirdos, but a lot of them are very skilled propagandists. And it's very effective. Again, like I said, this whole, fourth turning thing, very useful, or not useful, but like fascinating for people both on the left and the right. Like, I'm terribly interested in the whole thing, and but Bannon's and those folks are their goal is to form like this red-brown alliance. Have you heard this term before?
I haven't. It sounds sort of if I were to extrapolate out some meaning there without knowing, it sounds like my like social conservative in group that is politically higher on the social scale than your sort of neutral working man group. We want you guys on board. Like that's how sort of what it sounds like it is.
Well, okay, so the red is communism, right? That's the color of the communists, and brown refers to brown shirts, the color of the fascist.
Oh,
and
okay.
So a red-brown alliance is what these ethno-nationalists are trying to forge, right? They want to combine leftist populist economics with fascist conservative hierarchical social values. Okay. So basically,
this I gotta stop you right here. This feels like a very sort of, as opposed to the normal adverse thing that I feel like I deal with. I'm like, really? There's like, this is happening? It feels weird. It feels like a weird, like, we already have conservatives with more capitalist policies that they want, with like almost an independent libertarian feel is like what I see being like the arguments in government now. Like that's like the sort of the other side of it, and it feels so like the brown red alliance. I'm like, who you guys aren't probably gonna do well. Like, anyway.
Well, okay, no, think about it like this. Okay, so if you look at like the Republican Party in this country, okay, they're kind of at war with themselves. You've got your libertarian, your neoliberal hyper-capitalism side of the party. That's your Koch brothers, like that kind of donor network, right? Yeah. And your bank people, your Jamie Dimon from Chase, Mitch McConnell and Mitt Romney and those kind of Republicans, right?
Yeah, your old money.
Business first, yes. Well, but now you've got these MAGA fucks, right? And they're like, you ever hear them go after woke capitalism?
Personally, like, no. But yeah, okay, they
don't criticize woke capital. Well, like they're losing their shit over Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce.
Yeah, right? They don't. They're the things they go after. They don't claim it's woke capitalism. They claim it as a culture war thing of like it's always a psyop. It's the deep state. It's the deep state liberals that is like almost a new concept in all of this, and it's like, but it's always like over nothing. It's like that's just how capitalism works. I can see what you mean now. I can see what you mean, but it's weird to extrapolate that out to liberal like economic systems. Like that's like I'm like okay, it's like kind of go after woke capitalism is. Yeah, like I didn't see the two sides of the coin there until you put it in the terms right now. I'm like okay.
There's nothing woke about capitalism. Right.
Absolutely.
Okay. They slap a rainbow or on something, or recycling logos or some shit or whatever. For like Black Lives Matter shirts, they don't mean it. They're just selling a product. It's a market.
It's like, and okay. I think a part of it too is I say part of it. It's just something that I want to point out here. You brought up the Taylor Swift Travis Kelce thing. It's almost like trying to scrape the bottom of the barrel to find woke capitalism. It's like Taylor Swift only said to vote. The most milquetoast, like, I have something to say, I'm getting paid for an ad campaign type of thing. Not even a divisive statement.
Yeah.
But it is because if everybody votes, if the Taylor Swift fans vote, it's just the majority of how people normally are, it works against you. So you're like, it's a psyop. It's like, if it is, it's the dumbest psyop I've ever heard. It's not probably a psyop. Like, and I say that knowing full well it isn't a psyop. It's just like, it's wild.
It is wild.
They have to find things to pitchfork in a way that's just like, if you take 5 fucking seconds to think about it, it's like, well, obviously that's not the case. Somebody just paid her money to say vote, and it's like, obviously, like it, I'm not voting is more of a left sort of sentiment I've heard more often than not as a statement piece.
Yeah.
I've heard in general, I'm not going to vote because I don't care as a general statement. But you hear I'm not voting is more of a left thing.
Like a protest thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have swaths of the right, like we were saying, the Republican Party's at war with themselves, right, who are actually rejecting capitalism, right? Like, Taylor Swift's a billionaire, okay? Like, she's got more money than God. Travis Kelce is a football player for the National Football League, which is like the most capitalist enterprise you can imagine.
It's the only reason football is popular.
Cheerleader. When did the Republican Party lose their shit over the football player and the cheerleader? It's the most traditional conservative thing you can think of. But capitalism does, for all its problems, respond to market pressure. Yeah. And the mood of the general population anymore is toward more liberal social values. So whether or not capitalism actually believes it, they're going to put rainbows and Black Lives Matter and on things. And so you have the right who reject that.
Yeah.
Okay. They don't like the market pressure that capitalism is responding to.
It seems like a very narrow thing to sort of like hone in on. in this like they feel like very much outsiders in this. This group that we're talking about here seems very like I can't imagine what this political body is. Like when you say the red brown alliance type of people thought process, they feel very like on the fringe of it.
Yes,
but we hear about it so much because it's like
is about coalescing the fringe around the center.
Yeah.
Okay. Because think of American capitalism as the center, and you've got, large chunks of traditional Republicans and a lot of Democrats, way too many Democrats who are in thrall to the free market, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got your MAGA types over on the far right who are like, fuck capitalism, it allows liberal social values into our culture. And then you've got people on the left who are like, no, fuck capitalism. These greedy fucks are like keeping large amounts of people in poverty. Okay. There are legitimate criticisms. These folks, these Bannons and other fascists, are trying to align these two groups. So think left populist economics spread around the wealth. Okay. But only for the right people.
Right.
Okay, so only for the Volk. That's a good German term, right? Like it's nationalism plus socialism. There's a term for that, Tom.
Party membership.
It's Nazism.
Oh, that's what
It's just reinventing Nazism.
It's Nazism with extra steps. Yeah, that's like I was thinking this the whole time. I'm like, it just sounds like how like the Nazis operated because of the like, oh, you're part of the party, so you're part of the in group. You get this, but it's also like
yes, it's all about in group output.
And so the way you've described here too is, it feels like a ship built to wreck. I feel like with the past, I don't know, like 30, 40 years of cultural sort of like nomenclature about a certain way to be or ideologies it's a little late in the game for this specific ideology. And what I mean when I say that is they've spent the whole like Cold War and after still kind of like degrading the ideas of communism or like leftist sort of policies, and to come now in late in the game and try to use some of those policies in your own platform, but also with your other bullshit that is like it's so incongruent with itself. You know what it really reminds me of? I'm sorry if I'm being a little unclear here. That it sounds like the biggest problem with the left in America is that now you have too many idiots with different opinions saying different things that don't work together, and your party is now discord. And like it's like, I'm going to take this out for a minute and give you a story. I went when I was still living in Bloomington. I took part in like this protest for IU professors. I forget exactly what it was. It was about pay and the treatment of the professors at IU. And there was a big walkout and this, that, and the other. And it was really kind of my first big political protest. Maybe not, no, because I'd definitely been into some pro-choice things before that, but it was much more organized at a pro-choice thing than it was this like student-teacher alliance thing at IU. And I just realized, I was like, wait, why are we doing X, Y, and Z here? And somebody I knew just looked and they go, classic liberalism. I'm like, what? Because we were basically giving ground to police that were like, hey, you guys need to do this. And I'm like, why are we doing this? We're here, we're protesting, we are disrupting everything. And that's the point. Why play? It's also a college campus. And to really over-explain this, it's not like we are blocking emergency vehicles or anything like that on the roads, the streets. It's on a college campus. We're not on roads or streets, except for one time. And it's like, it is the point to disrupt everything. And there were people who, I remember going into classrooms and turning off lights and being like, "Where's the walkout?" And the guy that was with me, who was some random person who just followed me in there, was like, "What are you doing? You're crazy." He's like, "We're gonna get in trouble." It's like, "Yeah, we're gonna protest. We might get in trouble." Like, you didn't sign up for this. This is what the description was. Is to disrupt everything, protest. Like, this is for education, basically. And that was my first taste of, people who are placating the authorities, people who are not on the same page as me, and everything kind of being unorganized mess because everyone has too many of their own ideas in it. And in the left sort of viewpoint, that's how you want it to be, because you're not being, controlled by an ultra nationalist party or some bullshit like that, right? And to kind of bring this back to my point, seeing that and seeing how the left and leftists work in our country and in general, and are getting into arguments with people who are different within my own sort of thought process, like in sort of my own leanings as I am, like, it seems like now that's happening to conservatives in America. This whole thing you've described seems like just utter chaos and utter, like, they're not going to agree on this. And I don't know where they're going to end up. It sounds like one side of the boat, the propeller is spinning one way and the other side spinning the other way, and they're just going in circles. Like, I'm not sure when you break this down apart, what's going to happen. Like I think that you may have more insight to it than me, but I'm like, the next election, I have no idea what Republicans are going to be, who the Republican frontrunner is going to be. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Is that like the mess that I feel like they're in? And in a bigger sense, in a forest sense, I don't know where right-leaning people are going to be in this, because it seems like now they have too many ideas and too many sort of fields of ideology about it. Just like
ideas leftists. Of right and left, the axis that we're fighting on is changing. I mean, that's why now is a period of crisis, right? That the system that we have built, the hyper-capitalistic neoliberal system, sucks, right? It needs to change. It needs to be dismantled and put back together, right? I like to use the analogy of a house, right? This thing's got major foundational problems that need repaired, okay? We need to get in there, we need to jack up the house, change some things, put in a new beam, put in some new joists, and set it back down, right? To avoid causing major harm and disruption to people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
The far right, the brown, the far left, the red, they see that the situation that we have now sucks, right? I mean, we all, like, I think we all agree, right? Like, okay, neoliberal capitalism is broken. It doesn't work. And now we're arguing over the social order we want to put together in its place, right?
Yeah.
So the Red-Brown Alliance is about it's accelerationism, right? And I've written about this a little bit. They're both just trying to speed up the destruction of the current system. However, be damned, and then we can fight about how to build things in the future. I'm sorry. I think the left is far less organized and stands no chance of winning that fight. So I'd rather undertake the slow, deliberate rebuild, because I think if we blow the entire thing up, the people with all the guns are going to win, Tom.
Yeah. Yeah. You look at, we can go back and look at Russia as a good, maybe the Soviet Union as a good viewpoint on this. What happens when you build your house on uneven ground? It's like that's the reason I feel like, in an oversimplification kind of way, why I feel like the communism never really got a good hook in, because it was already built on the bones of a corrupt government that had nothing, and all it was kind of rebuilding the same kind of corrupt, like it's like tearing down a house that had rot damage and using the same wood to build the house. Kind of.
Yeah,
It's like it's just instead of the floorboards rotting, it's the walls now. Is how it feels.
well, and you've got a point, and I think the American system was built on white supremacy, and we've never properly addressed that foundational issue, and I think that's part of the major remodel that needs to be undertaken. Like we've had this like in fits and starts, right? Like we fought over this social order before in the 1860s, and had a chance to do that thorough, deliberate remodel, during Reconstruction, and abandoned it partway through.
Yeah.
And you just don't want to see the same mistakes of the past repeated, and that I think is kind of the central point I want to make here today. Right? There was a British historian named Arnold Toynbee who said, "quote, when the last man who remembers the horrors of the last great war dies, the next great war becomes inevitable." End quote. And I think right now, the World War II generation, the people who went through the last crisis, they're mostly gone. And so you've got these accelerationist red-brown types who are just itching for war, for suffering, for major conflict.
Yeah.
Because they believe in like the cleansing power of violence, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And probably a little traditional glory seeking, like forgets that this sort of conflict is not grand.
Yeah. So the people from those times who were on the front lines of their crisis times remember the horror. They remember the grief and the death and just the feeling, the hollowness, the burning emptiness, the horror, just every inside of you when you're surrounded by grief. And there too much of their message has been forgotten, I think. And the whole fourth turning, generational theory has been kind of oversimplified and explained as like you've all heard this. You probably your uncle probably posts it at Thanksgiving Facebook, right? Like, hard times create strong men who create good times, which create weak men, which create hard times, right? That's the oversimplified thing, which sounds like, okay, right? Okay, look, we're in hard times right now, right? We've agreed upon that. We've established we're in hard times. These fascist types are advocating for strongman rule. Think Trump, think Putin, think Netanyahu. Okay.
The guy in the room who shouts the loudest is right.
Yeah, they think that kind of guy is going to bring good times, right? And that, the good times bring weak men. The irony, and I think what's misunderstood, and why this is a poor simplification of the theory, is that the strong man, as it were, the strong man stereotype, isn't actually a strong man. They are weak men. Trump, Netanyahu, Putin, Orban, you pick them. Any of, your Uncle Ron who likes to flip the Thanksgiving table because, you brought your purple-haired girlfriend home. They think they're strong men, but, they're only half people, They've only developed the one part of themselves. The quote unquote stereotypical masculine side, right? You ever see the guy that's like fucking swole and has these like massive muscles, like just giant fucking Hulk Hogan 24-inch python biceps, and he's got like little scrawny chicken legs?
Yeah.
That's these people, right? They've buffed and worked out they're angry, they're powerful, they're violent side, right? And haven't worked on their empathy or their caring or their loving.
That people are missing the forest for the trees about the judgments of these other people?
I
think, is that what's happening? Is that's the name of this? That's the name of this episode, Scott. Is the forest and the trees? Let me tell you that right now. But I see where you're getting at here. It's like they see something that they are they're lacking themselves. B, like are like attributing to success that is not necessarily like bad. It's like, oh yeah, all these toxic qualities. That's what strength is. It's like you have an antiquated view of people and what's even good on an interpersonal level, and you're attributing it to governance of millions of people, and it's like that's bad. That's bad. You shouldn't do that.
The strong men, the real strong men that create good times are, I believe, those who have seen grief, who have suffered, and who work every day, who are determined to make sure that no one else has to suffer like they did, right? That no one else feel that suffering. That like war and hundreds of million people dead doesn't ever happen again.
Yeah,
those are the real strongmen, who lead with empathy. And it is the weak, half-developed, skipped empathy day every day at the gym guys.
How often do we see, like, I have to imagine that there are at least some vets that have toxic traits. It has to exist. There have to be people who have seen conflict that don't, you want to believe that like experiencing this would change a person. And I think it usually does, but it's interesting that we haven't seen their golden calf, as it were, to be like this guy right here, and it's somebody that's like, oh yeah, he's experienced this sort of thing, and he comes out the other side being like, yes, we need someone like me who is strong. Like, you don't hear that a lot, and I don't know what that means. I don't know if there just isn't anybody like that, because the experience will make you a different person than what they are pointing to and saying that's what will fix everything. Or if they're just not finding that. They haven't figured that out. I don't know. I'm hypothesizing maybes over here.
If you want to take a look at a historical example and rewind to the last crisis era and coming out of it, okay? Who was the president of the United States during the era people think of as that high, that post-World War II picket fence, era? Was Eisenhower, right?
Mm-hmm.
That man was a general. He saw the horrors of war, and this is the architect of D-Day. He's seen some things, man.
Mm-hmm.
And so after that, we built the institutions, theoretically, to keep this from ever happening again.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, Republicans were pissed. Eisenhower was a Republican. Other Republicans were pissed at him. They thought he was a communist because he basically kept the FDR New Deal order in place. This is a man who had seen the horrors of war and knew that the social safety net, taking care of others, social cohesion, these things were important in preventing the next war. And as we are now seeing, as we come to the end of like the Reagan era, right? The neoliberal era, where greed is good individuality has become the
commodity.
The motto, right? The social order is falling apart, and fucking all right. I'm gonna get weepy now because we've not talked about this on the podcast yet, right? This is gonna be our first episode back after a little bit of an absence here. Okay, I've written about this on my Substack, but I've not talked about this with our listening audience. I don't know if everybody who listens reads or vice versa, but my 19-year-old son passed away a little less than a month ago, and it is the most painful, burning grief you can imagine, and I would not wish this suffering on my worst enemy, not even Steve Bannon. And I don't know. Tom, I can't just sit here and do nothing. I understand we're in this shit. I saw it a year ago. We're haggling over the world right now that we want to build in the aftermath of this crisis period. Okay. Having known that pain, I cannot stand by and just let grief and killing and just be perpetuated. Sorry. The world that we build. Go ahead.
It's it's sort of the same things we've been talking about. You experience grief if you have the ability to do so. I believe we know there are people who do not have the ability to do so, but you experience
they're sociopaths or psychopaths. Yes.
Yeah. You experience grief. You kind of empathetically are like, I gotta stop this from happening one way or the other. It doesn't matter what it is, but it's not hard to extrapolate out things that will, you stop A and B from happening. The C is the grief that you stopped. It makes a lot of sense that's where people end up being.
I think there's like a couple ways you can go about it, right? It can either be like, I'm Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepared to die, right? I'm not a fighter. I'm more like, I'm Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Let's get to work making sure nobody else's father dies.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, there in this instance, there isn't a six-fingered man to kill, But your opinion on that might have changed if there's a six-fingered man you can kill and it starts fixing everything. But so often than not, people don't like to admit this. Just kind of on mindsets. There isn't some magical assassination that will fix everything. There isn't a perfect number of people to kill to fix the world's problems, and that is it's way easier to do that a lot of the times. It's like, oh yeah, just take out Osama bin Laden and it'll all be over. It's like that didn't stop anything. That didn't stop anything. And to some degrees, there might be some truth in that, but it's not only solely because of that. When Hitler blew his brains out, did that stop World War II? No, but it probably helped. Probably helps it go along a little bit more. But it's one of those things. If people want something easy, but I feel like you have the reality on your face. It's like nothing's ever that easy. It's work. Working on this to stop grief and pain and making the world a better place is not this grandiose, grandstanding action. It's a lot of work.
It is. It's a lot of small, boring work. And this accelerationism, the thing these folks are trying to do is like a cheat code. They think, okay, well, we're gonna tear down the system and rebuild it from scratch, right? They don't want to do the hard work of a full, complete remodel. But we're arguing over how the next saculum is going to look. right? We're arguing about the social order. If we accept this theory, that's going to be in place for essentially the next 80 years. The high, the awakening, the unraveling, and the crisis, yada yada. 80 years from now is 2100 or so. Okay. Climate change is a thing. Global warming is a thing. Mass extinction is a thing. Like diminishing natural resources is a thing. You can, there's no such thing as infinite growth on a finite planet, right? We are arguing now, this crisis era we are in now is about the world we're going to put in place to manage that.
Yeah.
Right? Are we going to be able to wind down fossil fuel use and, make a sustainable, livable planet to prevent extinction of, mass numbers of species, right? Are we going to be able to do that, to build that world, the one I assume you and I want to build, right? Or are we going to have the world that the Red Brown Alliance is trying to build, where if we just kill enough people, then there'll be plenty to go around?
Yeah. And you kind of paint a depressing picture. I have something, this is very reassuring when I heard it, and I didn't think about it. And it's something that we all, at least people our age, probably remember. You remember that hole in the ozone layer?
I do remember the hole in the ozone layer.
You know what you haven't heard about in a long time?
Yeah, we both fixed it, didn't we?
Yeah. And how do we, people were freaking out. That was definitely like a big part of, I wonder how we did that. Well, then people will be like, wait, we did that? Yeah, we did that. We stopped doing the thing. People actually attributed a lot of time and manpower, or at least like mind power, into stopping that. So it's, a lot of people I hear have a sort of, when you bring up climate change and, what extinction is it? The sixth extinction?
Yeah, I'll have to check.
I believe it's the sixth extinction.
Yeah.
People are like, sort of are like, they throw up their hands, and I'm like, hey, shut the fuck up. Like, that's not how this is. Like, we have every opportunity to like fix it. You may be, there may be such a thing as, thinking that capitalism will ruin the world. It also has, you could also like, it's not just money that takes this. There are a lot of people who care. So it's like, maybe also use some capitalism to fix it. I mean, that's I don't like saying that, but it's like, if you make saving the world profitable, your capitalist societies are going to profit on it. So that's a possibility. Like, there's a lot of ways to save the world, and just don't like, I don't know. People get too, they miss the forest for the trees on subjects like that. It's like, there's a whole other, this may not be your tree, this may not be the tree that saves the world, but maybe something over there it is. Like, they nihilism is going to totally head around.
Yeah, I get it. It's easy to miss the forest for the trees when we're in a crisis period and you've got trees, coming at you every day as fast as they can. We are all Sonny Bono here. And you don't have time to zoom out to see the forest. Crisis is coming at you fast. You said there's more than one way to save the world, and I will disagree, and I will say there is only one way to save the world, and that is together. Tom Levon, thank you for joining me here on this special first anniversary episode of the Who's Left podcast. I appreciate it, brother.
I appreciate being here.
Once again, that was my good friend Tom Levon. Let's summarize. Just as happens every 4 generations, the old world is dying while the new world struggles to be born. We are currently right smack in the middle of that 4th turning, that crisis generation. Social breakdown in America, war in Europe, war in the Holy Land, democracy backsliding globally, while ethno-nationalist authoritarianism rises, including in our own country, in our own state. We are in the midst of a struggle to define the new social order, the order that will define the next 80 years, the framework in which humanity must fully take on the challenge of climate change, lest the next saeculum-defining struggle 4 generations from now be for the survival of the human species itself. Do we want the new era to be defined by justice, fairness, and equity for all people? Or will that era be defined by hierarchy, dominance, and mass suffering? The forces advocating the latter are better resourced and better organized, and better armed. Building the wildly diverse coalition necessary to overcome them is like herding cats, but absolutely necessary for a humane, sustainable future. Next time, we'll zoom in on the future that Indiana Republicans are trying to build. Spoiler alert, it's not great. Join me and Mad Voters Chelsea McDonnell for that conversation tomorrow. Until then, this has been the Who's Left podcast. I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.